The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold, rose, and amber. Waves lapped gently against the wooden pilings of the pier, sending a rhythmic lullaby into the evening air. It was the kind of day that made people pause, take a deep breath, and feel alive. Alyssa adjusted the strap of her sun-faded backpack and stepped carefully onto the pier. She had come to the seaside town for a week-long escape from her hectic city life, craving nothing more than quiet reflection and a few golden sunsets. Yet, as soon as she set foot on the worn wooden boards, she sensed there was more to this place than its tranquil beauty. Up ahead, a man was leaning against the railing, his silhouette backlit by the sinking sun. He wore a light linen shirt, sleeves casually rolled to his elbows, and jeans that had seen better days. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, but there was a quiet intensity in the way he held himself, a tension that seemed out of place in such a serene setting. Curiosity nudged Alyssa forward. The pier wasn't crowded, just a few scattered couples and families enjoying the evening. She walked slowly, trying not to appear intrusive. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" she ventured, her voice soft enough to match the whispering waves. The man turned, and for a moment, their eyes met. Deep brown, like polished mahogany, warm and inviting yet carrying a depth of emotion she couldn't quite read. He offered a small, polite smile. "Yeah," he replied, voice low but smooth, tinged with something like melancholy. "Perfect, actually." Alyssa nodded, taking a tentative step closer to the railing beside him. The wooden boards creaked under their weight, echoing softly over the water. "I come here to think," she admitted. "There's something about the ocean that makes everything else fade away." He glanced at her, then back to the waves. "I know the feeling," he said. There was a pause, a subtle hesitation, as though he was deciding whether to share something more. "I come here when I need to, remember who I am." Her curiosity deepened. There was a story behind him, she could feel it, a story tinged with longing, perhaps even heartache. For several minutes, they stood in companionable silence, the sound of the water, the cries of distant gulls, and the faint smell of salt and fish mingling around them. Then, impulsively, Alyssa asked, "Do you come here often?" He chuckled softly, a sound that was both warm and strangely vulnerable. "Enough to know every plank and knot of this pier. But not enough to know the people who pass through it. Until now, maybe." Alyssa felt a flutter in her chest, a strange connection forming in the briefest of moments. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her want to stay, to linger longer than she had intended. The sun dipped lower, and the first stars began to twinkle faintly above them. He finally looked at her fully, meeting her gaze with a directness that made her heart skip. "I'm Ethan," he said, offering his hand. "Alyssa," she replied, taking it. The warmth of his hand lingered longer than a simple greeting, sparking an electric awareness that neither of them tried to hide. As the evening grew darker, the pier became a quiet sanctuary. The world beyond seemed to fade, leaving only the soft lapping of waves, the whispering wind, and the subtle pull between two strangers drawn together by fate, by curiosity, and perhaps by something deeper neither of them could yet name. The night promised more than a conversation, it promised discovery. And neither Alyssa nor Ethan could resist stepping into it. The night air had cooled, carrying a soft saltiness from the ocean and the gentle rustle of waves beneath the pier. Alyssa and Ethan continued to stand side by side, the wooden boards creaking softly with every small movement. Neither of them spoke at first, allowing the silence to stretch, a comfortable, almost intimate silence that seemed to exist only for the two of them. I never thought I'd meet someone here, Alyssa finally said, her voice low but playful. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye, catching him staring at the horizon again, as if looking for something he had lost long ago. Ethan smiled faintly. Most people don't notice the little corners of this town. They come for the beach, the boardwalk, the restaurants, but they miss the pier. That's why I like it. She nodded, sensing the hint of solitude behind his words. I think I understand. Sometimes the best places are the quiet ones, the ones nobody else sees. He turned toward her then, his gaze lingering in a way that made her heart flutter. And sometimes, the quiet places bring people together who weren't expecting it. Alyssa felt warmth spread through her chest. There was something in the way he looked at her, a mix of curiosity, admiration, and something unspoken that sent a shiver of anticipation down her spine. She swallowed, trying to steady herself against the sudden pull she felt toward him. You're mysterious, you know that, she said lightly, though her voice betrayed her curiosity. I don't know anything about you, and yet I feel like I've known you longer than a few minutes. He chuckled softly, running a hand through his hair. I guess some things just happen. Some connections aren't explained by time or circumstance. His eyes softened. I don't usually connect like this. But with you, it feels different. Alyssa couldn't help but smile, a quiet laugh escaping her. Different can be good. He nodded, and for a moment, they simply watched the moonlight ripple across the water. The reflection of the silver orb danced on the gentle waves, and the stars above seemed to shimmer in rhythm with the quiet pulse of the night. You said you come here to think, Ethan said after a while. What do you think about? Alyssa hesitated, surprised by the question. Life, mostly. Where I'm going, what I want, sometimes I just try to remember to breathe. She gave a small shrug. And sometimes I just watch the water and forget everything else for a while. Ethan nodded knowingly. I do that too. Only. I also try to remember the moments that matter. People I've met, experiences I've had. Sometimes a single evening can change everything, if you're paying attention. Their eyes met again, and this time there was no pretense, no hesitation. There was a quiet honesty in the way he looked at her that made her pulse quicken. She felt as if she had walked into a story she didn't want to end, a story that promised warmth, excitement, and a kind of closeness she hadn't realized she was missing. The wind picked up slightly, ruffling Alyssa's hair, and Ethan instinctively reached out to brush a strand from her face. His fingers lingered, tracing the line of her jaw with a gentle care that sent a thrill through her. She felt her own hand rise, almost without thinking, to touch his wrist, feeling the warmth beneath his skin. Careful, she whispered, her lips curling into a shy smile. You're making it hard to think straight. Ethan chuckled, a deep, low sound that made her chest tighten. Good, he said simply. I was hoping I would. Time seemed to slow as they stood close, the air between them charged with a subtle tension neither wanted to break. The pier felt like an isolated world, a place where only they existed, and the night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice soft but deliberate. Do you want to walk? He asked. There's a small cafe at the end of the pier, open late, with the best view of the water. Alyssa nodded eagerly. I'd love that. As they walked side by side toward the cafe, the first hints of intimacy settled over them like a warm blanket. Every brush of their arms, every shared glance, every small laugh built a connection that neither had expected but both were eager to explore. By the time they reached the little cafe, the pier had transformed from a quiet escape into the beginning of something that promised passion, discovery, and perhaps even a spark that could change both of their lives. The little cafe at the end of the pier glowed softly in the moonlight, its windows casting a warm, golden glow across the wooden planks. The scent of fresh pastries and brewed coffee mingled with the salty tang of the ocean, creating a comforting, almost intoxicating atmosphere. Alyssa and Ethan slid into a corner booth, their bodies brushing slightly as they sat down. Neither immediately spoke, content to let the quiet hum of conversation and clinking cups fill the space between them. It was a comforting, easy silence, one that felt surprisingly natural for two people who had only just met. Ethan broke the silence first. "I come here often," he said, glancing around the cafe with a small smile. "Not for the food, well, sometimes for the food. Mostly for the peace of it. It feels private, even when there are other people." Alyssa smiled, leaning back in her seat. "I like that. A quiet corner in a busy world. I think we all need those sometimes." She studied him carefully, noticing the subtle lines around his eyes, the easy confidence in the way he carried himself, and yet the faint trace of something deeper, something that hinted at past experiences, perhaps even heartbreak. Their conversation moved naturally from small talk to more personal stories. Ethan told her about his work. He was a writer, a traveler of sorts, someone who chased experiences more than stability. Alyssa shared her own story, about her career, her love of art, and her constant desire to see the world beyond the city streets she knew so well. The more they talked, the more Alyssa felt drawn to him. There was an authenticity in Ethan that made her feel seen, as though he recognized a part of her she didn't always share with strangers. And in turn, she realized that he was listening not just with his ears but with his heart. At one point, their hands brushed on the table, a light, accidental touch that lingered just a moment too long. Alyssa felt a small shiver run down her spine. She looked up at him, and he met her gaze with a quiet intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Sorry," he murmured, though his tone was soft, almost teasing. "I didn't mean to." "You don't need to apologize," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I liked it." A slow smile spread across his face, and for a moment, the world outside the cafe seemed to vanish. The only thing that existed was the two of them, seated in a quiet corner, the night stretching endlessly around them. "Do you believe in chance encounters?" Ethan asked after a while, his voice thoughtful. "People say everything happens for a reason, but sometimes I think it's just luck. Random moments that change everything." Alyssa considered his question, tracing the rim of her cup with a fingertip. "I think some encounters are meant to happen," she said softly. "Even if we don't understand why at first. Some people come into your life and leave a mark you can't ignore." He leaned back in his seat, eyes never leaving hers. "I feel that way right now," he admitted. "Like meeting you wasn't an accident. Like the pier, and this night, we're all leading up to this moment." Her breath caught, and she felt her heart beat faster. There was a vulnerability in his words that mirrored her own feelings, a raw honesty that drew her in. She wanted to reach across the table, to bridge the gap that was still between them, but she hesitated, savoring the anticipation. Outside, the wind whispered through the pier, carrying the sound of the waves and the distant cries of gulls. Inside, the warm glow of the cafe wrapped around them like a protective cocoon. Alyssa felt a sense of calm and excitement all at once, a feeling that she hadn't realized she had been craving until now. Ethan's hand moved slightly closer, resting near hers on the table. She didn't pull away, Instead, she let her fingers hover near his, feeling the warmth radiate from his skin. It was a subtle, deliberate closeness, the kind that promised intimacy without rushing it. "I've never felt this way before," she admitted softly, her eyes locking with his. "So quickly, but it feels right." He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Me too," he said. "I don't know where this goes, but I want to find out. With you." As the night deepened, the cafe grew quieter. The two of them lingered over coffee and pastries, talking, laughing, and occasionally sharing long, silent glances that spoke volumes. The pier outside was cloaked in moonlight, and the waves continued their gentle rhythm, as if the ocean itself were keeping time with the burgeoning connection between them. When it was finally time to leave, neither of them wanted to. Yet as they stepped back onto the wooden boards, side by side, there was a sense of promise in the air. A promise that this night, this chance encounter, was only the beginning of something neither could have anticipated but both desperately wanted to explore. The pier was quiet now, the faint glow of the cafe behind them slowly fading as they walked back toward the main walkway. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver ribbons across the gently rippling water. Alyssa pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, though the evening wasn't cold. It was the kind of night where the air itself seemed to hum with anticipation. Ethan walked beside her, close enough that their arms brushed occasionally, sending small shivers up her spine. Neither spoke much, content to let the sounds of the ocean and the soft creak of the pier boards carry their thoughts. But there was a shared awareness, an unspoken connection that neither could ignore. "You know," Ethan said softly after a few minutes, "I've been coming to this pier for years, but tonight, it feels different." Alyssa glanced at him, noticing the way the moonlight caught his hair, highlighting strands of gold against brown. "Different how?" she asked, though her voice carried a soft laugh, as if she already knew the answer. "Like it was waiting for something or someone," he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. "And maybe that's you." Her chest tightened, a mix of excitement and anticipation building in her. She wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but she hesitated, savoring the slow pull between them. "I think, maybe it was," she whispered, barely audible over the gentle lapping of the waves. They stopped near the edge of the pier, where the water stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight. Ethan leaned against the railing, turning slightly so that he faced her. There was a vulnerability in his stance that mirrored her own feelings, a shared hesitance, a quiet longing that neither wanted to rush. "I can't explain why," he continued, his voice low and steady, "but from the moment I saw you, I felt drawn to you. Like this night, this place, it all led me here." Alyssa felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had always believed in meaningful encounters, in moments that changed everything, and now she was living one. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "It's strange. I don't even know you, but it feels like I've known you forever." Ethan's gaze softened, and for a moment, the distance between them seemed charged with electricity. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and gentle, and she leaned into the touch without hesitation. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Alyssa didn't respond with words. She only nodded, her pulse quickening. The silence between them deepened, heavy with anticipation. And then, in a movement that felt both inevitable and perfectly natural, their hands met, fingers entwining in a tender grasp that spoke louder than words ever could. The world seemed to fade. The sound of the waves, the rustling of the wind, even the distant hum of the town, it all became background to the magnetic pull between them. They stepped closer, bodies nearly touching, and Alyssa felt a thrill of excitement as Ethan's other hand rested lightly on her waist. "You're incredible," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. His breath brushed her skin, sending shivers down her spine. "I don't want this night to end." Alyssa's heart raced, her mind a mix of exhilaration and wonder. "Me neither," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It feels like it's just the two of us." Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying her face, and she could see the same intensity mirrored in his eyes. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned in, giving her every moment to respond. Alyssa closed the small gap, leaning into him, and their lips met in a gentle, lingering kiss. It was tender at first, exploratory, a soft confirmation of the connection they both felt. The kiss deepened naturally, fueled by the shared anticipation and the electric closeness that had been building all evening. Alyssa's hands found their way to Ethan's shoulders, feeling the warmth of him through the fabric of his shirt. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, suspended between the moonlit water and the quiet night. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their foreheads resting together, eyes closed. "I've never felt anything like this," Alyssa admitted softly. "Neither have I," Ethan replied, his voice low, filled with sincerity. "But I want to. I want more, with you." A gentle breeze carried the scent of salt and the promise of the ocean night, wrapping them in a quiet intimacy. On the pier, under the moon and the stars, they stood together, knowing that something extraordinary had begun, a connection that neither time nor distance could easily break. The night on the pier had settled into a gentle rhythm, the sound of waves a constant backdrop to their quiet conversation and shared glances. Alyssa and Ethan walked slowly, side by side, feeling the comforting closeness that had grown between them. Each brush of their hands, each subtle touch, carried an unspoken promise, a sense of intimacy that went beyond words. "I can't remember the last time I felt this calm," Alyssa said softly, her eyes tracing the reflections of moonlight on the water. "Like everything outside this moment doesn't matter." Ethan smiled, his hand brushing hers again in a subtle gesture of connection. "That's exactly how I feel," he admitted. "It's strange, meeting someone and instantly feeling like they belong in your world. I didn't expect it, but I'm not complaining." They paused near a section of the pier where the boards were worn smooth by years of footsteps. The sea stretched endlessly before them, dark and infinite, and the night air wrapped around them like a warm cloak. Ethan turned slightly to face her, and Alyssa felt the familiar pull in her chest, a combination of anticipation, admiration, and the magnetic attraction that had drawn them together from the moment they first met. "Do you want to sit for a while?" he asked, nodding toward a small wooden bench near the edge of the pier. "I like to watch the water, especially at night. It's peaceful." Alyssa nodded, grateful for the pause, and together they settled onto the bench. The proximity was comfortable yet electrifying, the shared space between them charged with a tension neither had tried to ignore. They sat quietly for a moment, letting the sounds of the night fill the space between them. Then Ethan spoke, his voice low and sincere. "I've always believed that some people come into your life to teach you something. Maybe it's a lesson, maybe it's a reminder, sometimes it's just to show you what you're missing." Alyssa turned to him, intrigued. "And what lesson do you think I'm learning tonight?" He chuckled softly, leaning back slightly while keeping his gaze fixed on her. "That some moments, some people, are worth taking a chance on. That life can surprise you in the best way if you let it. Her heart warmed at his words. There was honesty in him, a raw sincerity that made her trust him instantly, even though they had only known each other for a few hours. She realized that she didn't want this night to end, didn't want the moment of connection, of shared vulnerability, to slip away. Ethan reached out, his fingers lightly brushing hers. Alyssa felt the spark of his touch and entwined her fingers with his, a silent acknowledgement of the connection they shared. It was subtle, but it spoke volumes, a promise that neither needed to put into words. "I never expected to meet someone like you tonight," Ethan admitted, his thumb tracing gentle circles over the back of her hand. "Someone who makes everything feel right." Alyssa felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "It's unexpected, but in the best possible way." The moment stretched between them, filled with quiet intimacy and anticipation. Alyssa leaned slightly against him, and Ethan responded naturally, shifting closer so that their shoulders touched. It was a small gesture, yet it carried the weight of something deeper: trust, warmth, and the promise of something more. The ocean waves whispered beneath them, rhythmic and steady, as if echoing the quiet heartbeat of their growing connection. The world beyond the pier, noise, deadlines, responsibilities seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a perfect, fleeting moment of closeness. Finally, Ethan turned his head toward her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't want this night to end," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. "Not yet." Alyssa smiled, leaning closer, feeling the warmth of his presence. "Then let's not end it," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They stayed on the bench, watching the moonlight ripple across the water, talking quietly about dreams, memories, and the simple joys of life. Every laugh, every gentle touch, every shared glance strengthened the bond between them, building a sense of intimacy that neither had anticipated but both deeply desired. As the night deepened, Alyssa realized that this connection, unexpected, powerful, and tender, was something she had been searching for all along. And with Ethan beside her, under the stars and the gentle sway of the pier, she felt the exhilarating certainty that this night was only the beginning. The moon hung high over the pier, casting a soft silver glow across the waves. The night had grown still, as if the world itself had paused to watch the quiet connection unfolding between Alyssa and Ethan. They walked slowly along the worn wooden planks, hands brushing together occasionally, each touch lingering longer than expected. Ethan stopped and turned toward her, eyes reflecting the shimmer of moonlight on the water. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes I think the best moments in life happen when you least expect them. And tonight, this feels like one of those moments." Alyssa smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I've felt that way too," she admitted. "It's strange, isn't it? Meeting someone, feeling this connection, and knowing it matters even though we've only just met." He nodded, his gaze gentle yet intense. "It's rare. And I don't want to take it for granted. I want to savor it, every second." She felt a flutter of excitement at his words. There was honesty in him, a raw sincerity that made her trust him completely. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to simply be present, to enjoy the closeness, the warmth, and the unspoken understanding that seemed to flow effortlessly between them. They reached a quieter part of the pier, where the waves lapped softly against the pilings and the only light came from the moon and distant lanterns. Ethan leaned against the railing, inviting her to join him. She stepped closer, and the proximity made her pulse quicken. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "There's something about you, something that makes me feel like I can be completely myself." Alyssa felt her heart swell. I feel the same way, she admitted. It's like I've been waiting for this, without even knowing it. Ethan smiled, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, grazing her cheek gently. Alyssa leaned into the touch, closing her eyes for a moment, savoring the warmth of him. I don't want this night to end, he murmured, his forehead resting lightly against hers. The closeness sent a thrill through her, a mix of anticipation and comfort that was both exhilarating and soothing. Then it doesn't have to, she whispered, her lips curving into a shy smile. She tilted her head slightly, meeting his gaze. There was a magnetic pull between them now, stronger than before, a silent invitation neither could resist. Slowly, naturally, Ethan leaned closer, his lips brushing hers in a gentle, lingering kiss. It was tender at first, exploratory, but it carried a growing intensity, fueled by the connection they had built throughout the evening. Alyssa responded instinctively, letting herself sink into the moment, her hands resting lightly on his chest. The world around them seemed to disappear. The sound of the waves, the whispering wind, even the distant hum of the town faded into the background. There was only the warmth between them, the electricity of closeness, and the quiet heartbeat of shared intimacy. When they finally parted, both were breathless, foreheads resting together, eyes closed. You make everything feel brighter, Alyssa murmured, her voice barely audible. Ethan's smile was soft, full of wonder and affection. And you make everything feel possible, he replied. Like this night, like us, it was meant to happen. They stood together, wrapped in the quiet magic of the pier, the moonlight painting silver patterns across the water. Every glance, every gentle touch, every shared smile deepened the bond between them, a connection that went beyond attraction into something tender and rare. I never want to forget this night, Alyssa admitted, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. Nor I, Ethan said, brushing his thumb lightly across the back of her hand. It's perfect. And I want to see where it leads, with you. For the first time in a long while, Alyssa felt completely safe letting herself feel, letting herself hope. The pull between them was undeniable, the emotional closeness profound. They remained on the pier, side by side, leaning on each other and savoring the quiet intimacy, aware that this night was the beginning of something extraordinary, a connection that neither wanted to let go. And as the ocean whispered below, the stars twinkled above, and the pier held them in its gentle embrace, they knew that whatever the future held, this night, this perfect, moonlit night, would stay with them forever. The first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon, painting the sky with gentle shades of pink and gold. The pier was quiet now, almost empty, save for Alyssa and Ethan, who remained near the edge, leaning against the railing and watching the world wake slowly around them. Alyssa shivered slightly as the cool morning breeze ruffled her hair, and Ethan instinctively draped his jacket over her shoulders. She felt the warmth of him near her, the gentle brush of his hand against hers, and the comforting certainty that had grown steadily since they first met. I don't want this night to end, she murmured softly, her voice barely audible over the whisper of the waves. Ethan turned toward her, eyes reflecting the soft glow of sunrise. It doesn't have to, he replied, his tone tender. We've only just begun. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Her heart fluttered at his words, and she smiled, leaning slightly into him. I feel like I've known you forever, she said, her voice full of wonder. And yet, every moment with you feels new, like discovering something beautiful for the first time. Ethan's hand found hers, fingers intertwining effortlessly. That's exactly how I feel, he admitted. It's rare to meet someone and feel such understanding, such connection. But here we are, and I don't want to let it go. They stood in silence for a while, letting the gentle rhythm of the waves and the soft light of dawn wash over them. The night had given them something unexpected, something profound, a connection that transcended the ordinary and promised something extraordinary. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice low and filled with emotion. I want to remember everything about tonight, he said. Every laugh, every glance, every quiet moment. But more than that, I want more nights like this, with you. Alyssa felt her chest tighten, a mix of joy and anticipation filling her. I want that too, she whispered. I want to see where this goes, to explore it, to just be with you. Ethan smiled, his eyes soft and warm. He reached up to brush a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Then let's promise something, he said, his voice gentle but earnest. No matter what happens, we cherish this, and each other. Every step of the way. Alyssa's eyes glistened as she nodded, the emotion of the moment washing over her. I promise, she said softly, her hand tightening around his. They remained close, leaning into each other, letting the morning light and the soft hum of the ocean create a quiet sanctuary around them. It was a moment of perfect intimacy, where words were secondary to the simple, profound act of being together. Ethan tilted his head slightly, bringing his forehead to rest against hers. You've changed this night for me, he murmured. You've made it unforgettable. And you've made it unforgettable for me too, Alyssa replied, her voice trembling with happiness. I don't think I've ever felt anything like this before. The sun began to rise fully, spilling warm light across the pier and glinting on the surface of the water. The town slowly stirred awake, but for Alyssa and Ethan, the world felt paused, suspended in the glow of their shared connection. With a soft laugh, Ethan suggested, shall we grab breakfast? There's a small place just off the pier that's open early. I'd like to continue this conversation. Alyssa grinned, the sparkle in her eyes mirroring the sunlight on the waves. I'd like that, she said, her hand still entwined with his. I think we have a lot more to discover, together. They walked slowly back toward the pier's entrance, the early morning light casting long, golden shadows behind them. Every step, every shared glance, every brush of fingers was a quiet promise, a reassurance that this was only the beginning of something rare, meaningful, and beautiful. As they disappeared into the awakening town, Alyssa looked at Ethan and felt a surge of certainty. This chance encounter on the pier had blossomed into something extraordinary, a connection that neither time nor distance could easily break. And as the waves continued their gentle rhythm below them, she knew, without a doubt, that their story had only just begun. The pier, once quiet and solitary, had become a place of beginnings, a place where two strangers had met, discovered, and embraced a connection that promised warmth, passion, and the kind of love that lingers long after the night ends. And with the sun rising behind them, Alyssa and Ethan stepped into the day together, hearts full, knowing that what had started under the moonlight would carry forward, bright and unwavering, into everything yet to come.